Welcome back, scholars. This is the independent practice for lesson 21. It starts on page 14 and it goes until page 18, including an essay. So to begin with, we are reading this small text called The Signs of Language. The genre is a report, which is not really a genre, so we're going to pretend it's an essay. And again, that's me, Ms. De Jesus, Ms. Reyes, Ms. Ruiz, Ms. Otomo, Mr. LeBlanc, Ms. Purcell, etc., etc. The Signs of Language by Simon Dario. In Nicaragua, deaf children made up a brand new language, their very own sign language. Their story began in the early 1980s when 500 deaf children enrolled in Nicaragua's first school for the deaf. The children came from hearing families scattered throughout Managua, Nicaragua's capital, and they had no language at all. They spoke neither Spanish nor used sign language. And our gist for that paragraph is there was no language, so they made one. People usually learn their first language when they are approximately 2 years old. Deaf children in the United States often learn American Sign Language, or ASL, because they learn ASL from their parents. In Nicaragua, however, no one spoke sign language until recently. Instead, these children communicated by using mimicas, or gestures. Deaf people use mimicas the same way hearing people might use pantomimes to mimic getting a drink or picking up the telephone. So this is in class when I ask you, like, hey, is that person using a phone? That's a pantomime. So that's what they're talking about here. Our gist for our second paragraph is that the deaf children didn't have a language. Soon after the school opened, that's an important detail, the children began to adopt very specific gestures to get across particular ideas. The new mimicas meant line up, time for lunch, and do you want to play, for example. Before long, the teachers noticed that the children were communicating among themselves in an unusual way. These deaf school children were creating a new language, and the number and complexity of the signs were expanding with every passing day. So then here, the kids made new language. Here. Over several years, the children developed rules on how to combine the signs. And this idea of developing rules is the big idea there. With new signs and new rules for putting together sentences, the children made their mimicas into a new language. Today, Nicaraguan Sign Language is still developing and changing, as do all languages. Other Nicaraguan schools for deaf children are teaching it, and it's even becoming a written language. Soon, Nicaragua's deaf children will be able to explain to the world how they created a new language. So our gist is actually right at the end there. They created a new language. Looking at the questions, which sentence would be best to include in a summary of this report? So again, look back at those gists, see what you have. And down here, which of the following choices best summarizes paragraph 2? Again, look at your gist. We are not doing the short response, so you do not have to do that. Moving forward. Now, since this one's independent, I'm going to basically not use my pen beyond these questions. So which detail is most important to include in a summary of lines 24 through 34? So that starts over here through 34. So we need a summary here. Then we have best fits in a summary of 36 through 43. So we have a separate one here, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. This is for question number 2. This is for number 1. Then down here, central idea. Do lines 45 through 53 best support. So it's going to go to the end. I'm just going to put CI for central idea because that one's different. And then over here, I notice I have 2 superscripts. And this is actually messed up in the text itself. So the first one is over here where it says line 30, 31, vowel shift 1. This is supposed to be small. And then the similar issue happened over here in line 35. NSF2 is supposed to be up there. But so this is the National Science Foundation. And this is during the great vowel shift of the 15th through the 18th centuries, English speakers gradually changed the way they pronounced vowels. So this one matches up there. And then we also have an essay. Plan your writing for question 4 on another sheet of paper. And yes, you are doing this essay. Thank you. This is a simple essay because it is only a one text essay, but you still need to do it. So in your response, be sure to explain how individual speakers can impact language change, and then summarize the details the author uses to explain this relationship. And obviously we're using details. So I'm just going to copy that up here. How do individual speakers impact language change? And that's going to help me keep that idea in my head as I read. Okay, so here we go. From Language Change by Nicole Mahoney from the National Science Foundation online. In some ways, it is surprising that languages change. After all, they are passed down through the generations reliably enough for parents and children to communicate with each other. Yet linguists find that all languages change over time, albeit at different rates. For example, Japanese has changed relatively little over 1,000 years. English, on the other hand, evolved rapidly in just a few centuries. Many present-day speakers find Shakespeare's 16th century text difficult, and Chaucer's 14th century The Canterbury Tales nearly impossible to read. And here we have our example of how these matches up. From the Canterbury Tales, this one's the 1400s. When that April with his shrews suit, the drought of March hath pursed to the root, and bathed every vein in switch liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. When April with its showers sweet has pierced the drought of March to the root, and bathed every vein with that liquid, whose power is produced the flower. Why they change? Languages change for a variety of reasons. Large-scale shifts occur in response to social, economic, and political pressures. History records many examples of language change fueled by invasions, colonization, and migration. Even without these kinds of influences, a language can change dramatically if enough users alter the way they speak it. Frequently, the needs of speakers drive language change. New technologies, industries, products, and experiences simply require new words. Plastic, cell phones, and the internet didn't exist in Shakespeare's time, for example. By using new and emerging terms, we all drive language change. But the unique way that individuals speak also fuels language change. That's because no two individuals use a language in exactly the same way. The vocabulary and phrases people use depend on where they live, their age, education level, social status, and other factors. Through our interactions, we pick up new words and sayings and integrate them into our speech. Teens and young adults, for example, often use different words and phrases from their parents. Some of them spread through the population and slowly change the language. No two individuals use a language in exactly the same way. The vocabulary and phrases people use are linked to where they live, their age, education level, social status, and sometimes to their membership in a particular group or community. Types of change. 3 main aspects of language change over time: vocabulary, sentence structures, and pronunciations. Vocabulary can change quickly as new words are borrowed from other languages or as words get combined or shortened. Some words are even created by mistake. As noted in the Linguistic Society of America's publication, Is English Changing? P is one such example. Up until about 400 years ago, peas referred to either a single pea or many pea. And y'all, they're talking about the vegetable. At some point, people mistakenly assumed that the word peas was the plural form of pea, and a new word was born. While vocabulary can change quickly, sentence structure, the order of words in a sentence, change more slowly. Yet it's clear that today's English speakers construct sentences very differently from Chaucer and Shakespeare's contemporaries. See the table above. So this is telling us to go back and look at that. Changes in sound are somewhat harder to document, but at least as interesting. For example, during the so-called Great Vowel Shift 500 years ago, English speakers modified their vowel pronunciation dramatically. This shift represents the biggest difference between the pronunciation of so-called Middle and Modern English. Agents of change. Before a language can change, speakers must adopt new words, sentence structures, and sounds, spreading them through the community and transmitting them to the next generation. According to many linguists, including David Lightfoot, NSF Assistant Director for Social, Behavioral and Economic Sciences, children serve as agents for language change when, in the process of learning the language of previous generations, they internalize it differently and propagate at a different variation of that language. Linguists study language change by addressing questions such as these. Can we trace the evolutionary path of a language? How do language changes spread through communities? How do historical circumstances influence language change? What is the relationship between language learning and change? Paths of change. NSF researcher Anthony Croce of the University of Pennsylvania is trying to understand how language change spreads through populations. With collaborator Beatrice Santorini, he is compiling an electronic collection of modern English texts covering the time period from 1700 to 1914, the beginning of World War I. The completed corpus, as it is known, will complement 3 others created independently over the past decade by researchers from the University of Pennsylvania and the University of York, England. The existing works, which span 900 years of English history, contain more than 4.5 million words of a text, carefully tagged and annotated for linguistic features. The publicly available collection gives researchers a standardized, searchable document to track changes in the English language over time. It helps them explore language shifts in a historical context and examine the link between language learning and change. So now it's up to you to work on the multiple choice questions. And I will say that this essay is not an English essay the way that we've been doing them. I would say this is probably a proper extended response because there's only one question here. And you can have maybe 2 examples of it. So I would say this is probably an intro, a body paragraph and a half maybe, and then a conclusion. If you try to get full 4 paragraphs out of this question, it's gonna be rough and exhausting for me to look at. So definitely this is kind of a 3 paragraph sort of essay. And of course, you can enter all of your answers for all of these questions, including the other ones, into the Google Forms, and this one might end up being a Google document just for simplicity's sake, so you don't have to write an entire thing into a Google form. If you have any questions, I'm going to be live streaming from 11:30 to noon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so you are welcome to ask me questions then, or of course you can text me, email me, Google Classroom comment, or Pupil Path message me. Bye!